RMS Titanic. On the night of April 14, 1912, the largest moving object ever created by human hands sliced through the calm Atlantic waters on its maiden voyage. The RMS Titanic was more than a ship, it was a floating palace, a testament to the industrial age's boundless confidence. Its designers had declared it virtually unsinkable, a claim that would haunt history. At 11:40 p.m., a lookout spotted something in the darkness, an iceberg, massive and silent, directly in their path. The ship's officers ordered a hard turn, but physics and hubris conspired against them. The berg scraped along the starboard side, opening the hull like a tin can. Water began flooding the forward compartments, and the unsinkable ship had less than 3 hours to live. As the bow dipped lower, the truth became undeniable. There were lifeboats for only half the passengers. The loading began in chaos, with first-class passengers given priority access to survival. Women and children from steerage were trapped below deck by locked gates, a barrier of class that became a death sentence. The ship's orchestra played on as the deck tilted at impossible angles. At 2:20 a.m., the Titanic broke in half and vanished beneath the surface. Of the 2,224 people aboard, more than 1,500 perished in the freezing water. The disaster shattered the illusion of technological invincibility. It led to the first International Convention for Safety of Life at Sea, mandating enough lifeboats for all passengers and 24-hour radio watch. The Titanic remains a monument to the hubris of believing humans could build something fate couldn't touch. Aberfan disaster. The mining village of Aberfan in South Wales lived beneath the shadow of enormous coal waste tips that loomed over the valley like dark mountains. For generations, the spoil heaps grew higher, fed by the endless extraction from the mines below. October 21, 1966 began as an ordinary Friday morning. Children filed into Pantglass Junior School, settling into their classrooms for lessons. Above them, unnoticed, the waste tip was moving. Heavy rains had saturated the heap, turning millions of tons of coal waste into a liquid avalanche waiting to break free. At 9:15 a.m., the tip collapsed. A black wave of slurry 40 feet high roared down the mountainside at tremendous speed. It engulfed the school, a row of houses, and everything in its path. The avalanche struck with such force that it drove the school building into the ground. Inside, 240 children and teachers were buried alive beneath thousands of tons of debris. Rescue workers dug frantically with their bare hands, but time was the cruelest enemy. The final toll was devastating. 116 children and 28 adults died, most of them in the school. An official tribunal found the National Coal Board guilty of negligence, revealing they had known the tips were unstable. The community's grief was compounded by bureaucratic cruelty when the Coal Board demanded that compensation funds be used to remove the remaining tips. Aberfan became a symbol of corporate indifference to working-class lives. The disaster led to sweeping changes in waste management laws, but for the village, half a generation of children were gone, and no amount of regulation could bring them back. Herald of Free Enterprise. The Herald of Free Enterprise was a roll-on, roll-off ferry designed for efficiency and speed. Passengers and vehicles drove straight on, straight off, maximizing turnaround time in the competitive cross-channel trade. On the evening of March 6, 1987, the ferry departed Zeebrugge Harbor in Belgium, bound for Dover with 459 passengers and 80 crew. It was a routine sailing, the kind made thousands of times before, but someone had made a fatal mistake. The massive bow doors, which should have been closed before departure, remained wide open. As the ship picked up speed, water began flooding the car deck. The Herald was a shallow draft vessel, top-heavy by design. Within 90 seconds of leaving harbor, the ship capsized onto its side in shallow water. Passengers were thrown across cabins, trapped as the ship rolled. The cold water of the North Sea poured in through every opening. Of the 539 people on board, 193 drowned, many of them trapped in air pockets inside the hull, waiting for rescue that came too late for them. The investigation revealed a catastrophic failure of communication and responsibility. The assistant bosun, responsible for closing the doors, had fallen asleep. The captain had no indicator system to confirm the doors were shut. The company's culture prioritized speed over safety, with captains pressured to depart on time regardless of conditions. It was the worst peacetime maritime disaster involving a British ship since the Titanic. The tragedy led to a corporate manslaughter case, though charges were eventually dropped. The disaster proved that modern shipping, for all its technology, was still vulnerable to the oldest maritime mistake, leaving a hole in the hull. Seveso disaster. The small Italian town of Seveso sat in the pastoral countryside north of Milan, a quiet place where families had lived for generations. On July 10, 1976, a Saturday afternoon, a chemical reactor at the nearby ICMESA plant overheated during a shutdown procedure. A safety valve ruptured, releasing a toxic cloud into the summer air. The cloud contained TCDD, one of the most poisonous substances ever synthesized, a dioxin so toxic that micrograms can cause devastating harm. The white cloud drifted silently over Seveso, invisible death falling like snow on gardens, playgrounds, and fields. Within days, plants began to wither and die. Birds fell from the sky. Domestic animals collapsed, their bodies covered in lesions. Children who had played outside developed chloracne, a painful skin condition. The full horror became clear only when scientists tested the soil. The contamination was catastrophic. Authorities evacuated over 700 people from the most affected zones and declared them uninhabitable. More than 300 animals were slaughtered to prevent dioxin entering the food chain. Pregnant women in the contaminated area faced an impossible choice, as dioxin is a known teratogen. The disaster's legacy extended far beyond Seveso's borders. It led to the European Union's Seveso Directive, landmark legislation requiring companies to prove their industrial processes were safe and to inform nearby communities of hazards. The contaminated topsoil was eventually excavated and buried in a specially constructed tomb. Houses were demolished, and the most poisoned areas transformed into a memorial park. The disaster proved that chemical accidents don't announce themselves with explosions or flames. Sometimes the deadliest disasters are the ones you can't see until it's already too late. Oppau explosion. The BASF fertilizer plant in Oppau, Germany, was a monument to industrial chemistry's power to transform the world. In the aftermath of World War I, feeding a hungry nation depended on the mass production of agricultural chemicals. The plant specialized in ammonium sulfate and ammonium nitrate, compounds that could nourish fields or, under the wrong conditions, detonate with the force of military explosives. By September 1921, thousands of tons of fertilizer had solidified into a concrete-like mass in the storage silos, preventing its distribution to farms. Workers had developed a routine solution, using small controlled explosions to break up the hardened material, a procedure they had performed hundreds of times without incident. On September 21, 1921, at 7:32 a.m., workers detonated charges in a silo containing 4,500 tons of fertilizer. This time, the entire mass exploded. The blast was equivalent to several tons of TNT, creating a fireball that rose hundreds of feet into the air. The explosion was heard over 300 kilometers away. The factory was obliterated instantly. The shockwave flattened every building in Oppau and devastated neighboring towns. A crater 300 feet wide and 60 feet deep marked where the silo had stood. The human cost was staggering. Between 500 and 600 people were killed instantly, with another 2,000 seriously injured. Entire families were erased. The disaster revealed the deadly potential of industrial chemicals when treated with routine indifference. Investigations showed that the specific mixture of ammonium nitrate and sulfate had created an unexpectedly sensitive explosive compound. The Oppau explosion became a cautionary tale taught in chemistry and safety courses worldwide, proof that familiarity breeds the most dangerous form of complacency. Hillsborough disaster. April 15, 1989 was supposed to be a celebration. Liverpool and Nottingham Forest football fans were gathering at Sheffield's Hillsborough Stadium for the FA Cup semi-final, one of English football's most anticipated matches. Thousands of Liverpool supporters congregated outside the Leppings Lane terrace, waiting to enter. Inside the stadium, the central pens behind the goal were already dangerously overcrowded, but there was no system to redirect fans to emptier sections. Outside, the crowd pressed against the turnstiles, creating a dangerous crush. At 2:52 p.m., with the match about to begin, police made a fateful decision. They opened an exit gate to relieve pressure outside, but failed to close the tunnel leading to the already packed central pens. A surge of fans poured through, unaware of the conditions inside. Within minutes, the pens became a death trap. Fans were crushed against the high metal fencing designed to prevent pitch invasions. People screamed for help as the pressure became unbearable. On the pitch, players noticed supporters climbing the fences, desperately trying to escape. The match was stopped at 3:06 p.m., but for 97 people, it was already too late. The immediate aftermath was marked by shocking failures. Police blamed drunk fans, a lie that would poison the search for truth for decades. The tabloid press published false stories about Liverpool supporters. The victims' families fought for 27 years for justice, facing a system determined to protect institutions over individuals. Finally, in 2016, an inquest jury ruled the 97 were unlawfully killed due to police failures. Hillsborough changed stadium safety forever, leading to all-seater stadiums across England. But more than that, it became a symbol of how working-class lives could be deemed expendable, and how the powerful would close ranks rather than accept responsibility. A Skidi train derailment. The ICE 884 train was a marvel of German engineering, a high-speed express capable of traveling at over 280 kilometers per hour. On June 3, 1998, it departed Munich bound for Hamburg, carrying 287 passengers who trusted in the legendary reliability of German rail technology. The train was running at top speed through Lower Saxony when a fatigue crack in a wheel rim finally gave way. The wheel fragmented, sending debris into the undercarriage. A piece jammed into the track switching mechanism, and at 200 kilometers per hour, the train began to derail. The first cars left the rails but stayed relatively intact, passengers thrown from their seats but alive. Then the derailing train struck a concrete bridge support. The impact was catastrophic. The bridge collapsed onto the train, crushing passenger cars beneath thousands of tons of concrete and steel. The destruction was total, the wreckage so complete that rescue workers initially couldn't determine how many cars had been involved. The final toll was 101 dead and 88 seriously injured, making it the worst train accident in German post-war history. The investigation revealed that the wheel design, intended to provide a smoother ride, had a fatal flaw. The metal rim was held to the wheel by rubber dampeners that masked the development of cracks during inspections. Warnings about potential weaknesses had been ignored in favor of passenger comfort. The Aschedi disaster shattered the myth of technological perfection. It proved that even the most advanced systems fail, and that the faster we travel, the less margin for error exists. The Deutsche Bahn removed all similar wheels from service, but the price of that lesson was measured in shattered families and lives cut short. Mont Blanc Tunnel Fire. The Mont Blanc Tunnel was an engineering triumph, an 11.6-kilometer passage bored through the Alps, connecting France and Italy. It shortened the journey across the mountains by hours, a vital commercial artery carrying thousands of vehicles daily. On March 24, 1999, a Belgian truck carrying margarine and flour entered the tunnel from the French side. Somewhere in the darkness of the tunnel's midpoint, the truck's engine caught fire. The driver, noticing smoke, stopped the vehicle and tried to extinguish the flames with a fire extinguisher. The fire was already beyond control. Within minutes, the tunnel became a furnace. The truck's cargo, seemingly harmless food products, burned with intense heat, reaching temperatures over 1,000 degrees Celsius. Thick, toxic smoke filled the tunnel, reducing visibility to zero and making the air lethal. Drivers behind the burning truck were trapped, their escape routes cut off by the advancing smoke. Some abandoned their vehicles and ran back toward the French entrance. Others tried to drive through the smoke and perished at the wheel. The fire burned for 53 hours, so intense that it damaged the tunnel's structure. 39 people died, most from smoke inhalation. Many were found in their vehicles, overcome before they could escape. The disaster exposed critical safety failures. Emergency exits were too far apart. The ventilation system actually spread the smoke rather than clearing it. Fire suppression systems were inadequate for such an intense blaze. The Mont Blanc tunnel remained closed for 3 years while it was completely rebuilt with modern safety systems. The disaster led to a wholesale rethinking of tunnel safety across Europe, proving that the very structures designed to make travel safer could become death traps when fire turned them into horizontal chimneys. Kaprun funicular fire. November 11, 2000, was a perfect day for skiing in the Austrian Alps. The Kaprun resort was filling with excited tourists, many of them young people and children on ski trips. The funicular train that carried skiers up to the Kitzsteinhorn Glacier was a marvel of mountain engineering, climbing through a tunnel at a steep angle. At 9 a.m., a train carrying 162 passengers began its ascent. Most were teenagers from Germany and Austria, talking excitedly about the day ahead. Halfway up the tunnel, a heater in the driver's cabin malfunctioned, igniting hydraulic fluid. The fire started small, but within seconds it became an inferno. The tunnel acted as a chimney, and the train's plastic and metal construction fed the flames. Toxic smoke filled the tunnel, racing upward faster than anyone could run. The driver tried to reverse the train back down, but the fire had damaged the hydraulic system. The train stopped, stranded in the tunnel. Passengers in the rear cars broke windows and tried to run downward through the smoke. Most didn't make it. Those who ran upward, following their survival instinct to escape to higher ground, ran directly into the densest smoke. The disaster killed 155 people. Many died still seated in the train, overcome by toxic fumes before they could even attempt escape. 12 survivors owed their lives to breaking a rear window and running downhill, against every instinct. The investigation revealed catastrophic design failures. The funicular used flammable materials throughout its construction. There were no effective evacuation procedures. The tunnel's design created a perfect chimney effect that turned smoke into a racing wall of death. Kaprun led to a complete overhaul of mountain railway safety standards across Europe. The disaster proved that in a tunnel fire, the direction you run can mean the difference between life and death, and that the instinct to climb to safety can lead straight into the flames. These 9 tragedies remind us that progress always carries risk, and that the price of ignoring warning signs is paid in lives. Each disaster led to change, new regulations born from grief. But perhaps the most haunting lesson is how many of these catastrophes were preventable. How many people died not because of unavoidable fate, but because someone, somewhere, chose speed over safety, profit over precaution, or convenience over care. The memorials stand, the regulations remain, and we are left with the uncomfortable truth that civilization's advancement is sometimes paved with preventable loss.